Okay, good morning. You're on the phone.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Okay, so here we are. And, yep, it's Parsha Shelach. It's just a few days to the dinner. There isn't anything else happening of significance other than the fact that it's June. The Knicks are in a 7-game series or something or other. Yeah. Yeah, that's about it. So, sometimes we get so used to holidays and special occasions that we forget that there's such a thing as non-holiday season, just regular weeks when you just daven and do all the other mitzvahs. There has to be a baseline. The Sefer HaChinuch, he gives a psychological approach to everything possible in the Torah, and he talks about the holidays as a general concept because people need some time to celebrate, and so the Torah says, let's do it in a way that's spiritually constructive. It's just a very pragmatic way, not to take away from the importance of each holiday, but everyone has holidays, every culture, every religion. Some says, since it's a human need, let's channel it in a way that. So the idea is that everything, whether it's routine or whether it's a departure from routine, you can't depart from a routine unless you have a routine. They both serve a purpose, like everything in life. It's important to have a routine. It's important to have Seder, as we call it. It's also important to be able to be flexible and to know when there are when the Seder changes. Not in a way that derails, but in a way that everything has defined everything in its place and time. Okay, so we were talking about, speaking of our regular order of things, we're talking about the laws of Shabbos. So different types of restrictions in areas that are not strictly work, but that are work-oriented. So to clarify a concept, and we talked about preparation, right? Pursuing your needs and speaking about non-Shabbos things. Both phrases in the sentence of Yeshayahu Hanavi, which address how we walk on Shabbos, which is something in and of itself. Pursuing your needs and speaking about non-Shabbos activities, which sound like similar things but are not quite the same. And as they explain it here, is positioning yourself or kind of strategizing, orienting yourself towards work activities. So, like we talked about, standing in front of a store or waiting at a bus stop, or going somewhere that will enable you to start something right after Shabbos in a way that's obvious and that's what you're trying to do. That's Davar is simply sitting and talking and saying, tomorrow I have a big job, or I'm going to mow the lawn on Tuesday, where there's no preparation. Obviously, in many cases, one can violate both of these things simultaneously. So if you discuss which flight you're going to take, so in order to get good advice on how to get the best price, you're both pursuing weekday activities and speaking about work-related things. But again, theoretically, it's possible to do one without the other. You can talk about work that you're going to do in a way that's simply informative. I've scheduled myself for a hairdresser's appointment on Wednesday. You're not making any preparations or facilitating. You're simply telling someone that you're going to do work, but even the speaking about it is not allowed. And then on the converse, again, if you walk to a bus stop and stand there, you're not saying anything, but you are positioning yourself in an obvious way for work, and that's why those are two separate and technically unrelated. Both of these things are permitted when it's for a mitzvah. So certainly when necessary, you can go and wait for the bus, and you can say, I'm going to wait for the bus so that I can get on the first bus to go pay a Shabbat call, or whatever it is. It's better not to if you can avoid it, if it's not necessary to do it on Shabbos, but it, strictly speaking, is permitted.
I have a hairdresser appointment on Wednesday, but you can't say, and you need to make
It's an interesting question. If you say I have a hairdresser appointment on Wednesday, it does not sound kosher to me. Although technically speaking, I can't be sure that it's forbidden. Uh, the My understanding is that the exact prescription of what's not allowed, according to halacha, is to state your intention to perform work. So if you say, I'm driving to the hairdresser on Wednesday, or something like that. Saying I have an appointment isn't really, you're not really saying you're going to do anything. And honestly, getting your haircut is not really doing work either. You're just sitting in a chair. So I'm not sure. It's like saying I have a doctor's appointment on Wednesday, which I don't think is forbidden. I mean, theoretically, you could go to the doctor on Shabbos if the doctor, if you would walk there and the doctor, were just going to put in a tongue depressor and look at your throat. I mean, I don't see what the problem is with that. People go to restaurants on Shabbos. There are restaurants that have prepaying, and they serve meals on Shabbos. You can say I'm going to a restaurant on Shabbos. If that's, and even if you are, like, even if the person is going to be paying and driving, they can still say I'm going to do it. That they shouldn't be doing it. But if they say I'm going to go to the restaurant isn't really because you could theoretically go to a restaurant which is prepaid, and you could theoretically walk there. So it's the verbalizing. No, it says that explicitly. You could say I'm going to LA tomorrow. And that's allowed. Why? Because you could walk. The story about Rav Baker, the same story. The guy said, my father lives in Chicago. He wants me to come and visit. Do I really have a halachic requirement to spend money on a plane ticket? He said, Rav said, you're right. Honoring your father is not a mitzvah that obligates you to spend money. So you can start walking. But that actually is the halacha. It says you're allowed to say, I'm going to go to LA because you could theoretically walk there. Now, you might argue that you can't because there's something called Tchum Shabbos. You're not allowed to walk more than 2,000 amos outside of the city, but that's okay because if you set up way stations, every 70 amos there's a little food kiosk that would extend the halachic perimeter of the city. You could theoretically have a line of them stretching all the way across the Rockies to LA, and then you'd be allowed to walk. So it says even though I once had to do that. I was once driving to visit my uncle in LA, and this is when Chafetz Chaim had a high school branch in San Diego. So I was there, and of course I was going to visit my uncle in LA at least once for Shabbos. And of course everyone in the Chafetz Chaim assumed, I guess, that I was going to go to the valley because that's where all the Chafetz Chaim guys live. But my uncle didn't live in the valley; he lived in the city. So the rabbi very nicely lent me his car and suggested that I could take a certain detour. Switch from the 5 to the 405 around Irvine, and I could bypass it. I said, fine, but he didn't tell me that after I was finished with the detour, I'd be on a different, I wouldn't be heading back to the city, I'd be heading to the valley. So there I was, and I was in the wrong part of Los Angeles, and I parked the car because it was Shabbos, and I walked across half of LA. But then I had to explain to people, at one point, I remember explaining to the policeman, where I was trying to get to. Was like, oh, are you going to the Jewish community? Why don't you ask them to pick you up? They'll do that for you. They will, but not today. I need to get there today. It's Shabbos. So, but it was very nice. It was LA, so the weather was fine. And I got there, and they said, yeah, we figured you would get lost somewhere. We figured you'd show up eventually. And they still had food, so it was fine. But I remember that I walked into a hotel lobby. I think I looked at the map. They had actually a paper map, which is something they used to have in the old days. And I was able to look at it and see where I was going. And there was one road that basically went across, half the city. I just followed it. It changed names once or twice, but it was an experience. Anyways, so yeah. So anyways, I mean, if you would have been there, we wouldn't have gotten lost in the first place. Obviously, we would have stopped and asked 16 people for directions. Anyways, so. So that's right. So there's another thing called tircha. Tircha means effort. Now, I don't know if it's technically a completely separate restriction or it overlaps with the previous ones, but again, there's a nuance here that's slightly different from what we've been speaking to until now. So we've spoken about, again, positioning activities. Walking to a bus stop it's an obvious attempt to position yourself to pursue a weekday activity that you can't do yet, but that you want to do when Shabbos is over. And we talked about talking about weekday activities. And then there's simply preparation, doing things that they may not be involved with weekday activities at all, but it's effort that does not in any way benefit you on Shabbos. Now you could say, because I think we spoke about this a bit, you could say, well, okay, well, let's give some examples. So arranging your furniture, cleaning out your garage or your basement. So okay, let's classify it. Some activities are just absolutely too strenuous for Shabbos. So rearranging your furniture. Even if you want to rearrange the furniture, and when you finish, you'll be, I have a living room with a couch and some armchairs, and for years I've been complaining that the couch was in the wrong position. I think today would be a great day to rearrange the couch, and of course, as soon as I rearrange it, I'm going to enjoy my room much more, and it will still be Shabbos. So technically speaking, you can argue that this is just as much of a Shabbos related. It's not, this activity is not geared for the weekday any more than it's geared for Shabbos. It's simply because I want my room to be more efficient or more pleasant to sit in. Nevertheless, it's the kind of effort that's not appropriate for Shabbos. So he says, when they not exert himself for any non-Shabbos needs, even when the exertion involves neither malacha nor preparation for any post-Shabbos need. You see the nuance there. It's a non-Shabbos need, but it's not preparation for a post-Shabbos need. It's simply not something I need on Shabbos, as opposed to, let's say I'm making a bar mitzvah or making a kiddush, and it's a lot of effort to set up for the kiddush. What am I going to do on Tuesday? I mean, it has to be done. It's for Shabbos. That obviously is okay. But here, it's not for a weekday particularly, but it's not really for Shabbos particularly either. It's simply a strenuous activity that I happen to have time for today because it's Shabbos. So that's not okay. Any excessively strenuous activity that due to the considerable exertion is only infrequently embarked upon is prohibited on Shabbos. Again, prohibited. Right. Prohibited, not allowed.
If you have guests who suddenly show up.
Again, that's like making a kiddush. There are guests that I need to accommodate today. You have to think about what's the alternative, right? With the couch, it's like redecorate your home on some other day. But when it's for Shabbos specifically, again, some things are very strenuous on Shabbos. I mean, imagine if you have one of these Hasidic. I can just imagine what the shul in New Square or in Viznitz, what it's like to set it up, from one field, right? The Rebbe has a tish. I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of effort and activity like it's involved, but that's for Shabbos. So heavy chores. However, moving furniture or setting chairs for a minyan or a Torah lecture to be held on Shabbos is permitted. Right. It also includes monotonous, tiresome activities that are not ordinarily part of people's regular needs. One should not perform such tedious and menial tasks on Shabbos. Feeding animals that are not your pets, they're not animals you're responsible for. Placing flowers in water, even if they're not growing from the ground, they're already cut and they're fully bloomed. There's no planting or growing. It's simply considered a unnecessary effort for Shabbos. Minor chores and tasks for Shabbos are permitted. Setting the table, bringing in chairs. Okay. To avoid monetary loss, it is permitted to do minor efforts. So you left your furniture outdoors, you want to cover it with a tarp, or even if you left construction lumber outside. Now that's certainly not something you're going to use on Shabbos. You can't use it on Shabbos. You can cover it to prevent a loss. Or if you made, as we talked about the other week, made a big pot of chicken soup and it's too hot to put it in the fridge or the freezer. So you have some of it on Friday night, and the rest of it you're going to freeze and use it for the next 3 weeks. Right? So you want to freeze it in 3 separate containers and take one out each Shabbos for the next 3 weeks. So you ought to put it in the freezer and divide it up into 3 containers and make sure the containers all have the same amount of soup. Why you allowed to do that? Because otherwise it's going to spoil. So it's to prevent loss. Right.
Excuse me, Rabbi?
Yes. Yeah.
Question, please. So what is considered measuring? I always wondered about that.
Measure, it's okay. I didn't mean that you could actually measure. I meant more like, making sure there's a little bit of vegetables in each container and a little bit of soup in each container. Measuring is a separate activity that's prohibited, also rabbinically.
Making sure that you have the same amount in each container.
Yeah, so I didn't mean a little. I mean, that's not considered measuring. Measuring requires some degree of precision. I meant more like, my point was simply that there's a certain amount of It takes a few minutes just to, I put too much in this container, let me divide it up, this one has all the vegetables, this one has all the soup, let me just make it more even. So my point is simply it may take you a few minutes and it may involve, 3 minutes of effort, 3 to 5 minutes of effort, but that's still okay because it's to prevent loss. That's all I meant. The truth is, if you have it all in containers, the only issue is that the soup is not evenly distributed. One might make the argument that it's not prevent loss anymore because I can put it in the freezer as is, and my desire to have the soup be uniform may not be maybe sort of an additional level of effort that doesn't real. I can't really justify that as a Shabbos to prevent loss. That's simply to make it easier next time I defrost the soup. So I'm not sure about that. So maybe we can scratch that detail from the record.
Okay.
So again, as far as the category, so major effort, he says, is not allowed even for Shabbos needs. So that's something that he says you might define that as an activity people would classify as a major project that would require prior planning, moving very heavy furniture to redecorate a room, stacking cases of wine or food or large items to tidy up the basement, even if you want to organize items that you'll need on Shabbos. They're considered major projects. Minor projects are the type of things that you do for common everyday needs. So bring in a few boxes that were left outside. You want to bring them in. So again, if you don't need them on Shabbos, that's not something you should do. But if you're afraid it's going to rain and it'll get ruined, you can do it because of the loss. You're trying to move some boxes out of the way because you want to get something behind them. So again, if you didn't need to do it on Shabbos, you should do it after Shabbos. But if it is something that you need on Shabbos that's behind the boxes, then moving them away is a minor effort that would be okay. Setting up folding chairs and tables for the Shabbos meal, these are minor efforts that should not be done. Again, if you're doing it, we finished the meal, let's fold up the table so we can put it in storage for next Shabbos, that's not okay. But if we're opening on the table, unfolding it because we need it for this Shabbos, it's okay. And the same token, if we're folding it because it's taking up too much space and we need the room, that's also okay. Okay. Now, preparation is a subcategory where there's the issue is not effort; it's an activity that only serves the purpose of preparation for a later time, for after Shabbos. So washing dishes. It's an activity that clearly is done for preparation for after Shabbos. Even apparently, I didn't realize this. Even hataras nedarim, annulling a vow, is not allowed because it's considered a form of preparation. Yeah. Okay. I thought it was something else. I thought it was a different issue. What? We do before the Kippur, yeah. We do in Kol Nidre, so we don't really measure the level of effort. Obviously, some of these types of preparation are very non-strenuous. So it's really a question of how distinct and obvious it is. So putting food back in the fridge, obviously you could do it if it's going to spoil because that's to prevent loss. But if you simply, I took something out, I helped myself, I want to put it back, that's allowed because there's no effort at all. It's not a activity that's obvious. It's just simply what you do. You take it out, you put it back. It's done without thinking automatically, and it's simply a part of the way you would use an item in a normal course of everyday activity. Because hachana is forbidden only when the activity by its very nature bespeaks preparation. Commonplace activities in which the concept of preparing for anything is removed from people's minds are not hachana. There's no perception of tircha.
Rabbi, you cannot wash the dishes doing Shabbos after the meal because it's obvious preparation.
Washing dishes is right. It's clear.
But can you fill them with water
so it's right. I believe it says that if you have a basin of water prepared for me for Shabbos, and you can just drop the dishes. Oh, so okay. According to some poskim, one may put used pots and dishes into a tub of water to soak, so as to prevent the food residue from drying and adhering to the dishes, making later washing more difficult. Because this is a type of loss prevention. That's why it is. And you would actually, according to them, I guess, be allowed to fill up a basin of water on Shabbos and then put the dishes in. So other poskim seriously question this rule and consider this a true example of forbidden hachana. A more acceptable. Oh yeah, if you're washing them to use on Shabbos, you could do from A to Z. If you're going to use the dishes that day. Not only that, I'm pretty sure I heard that even if you have a whole drawer full of forks, you're allowed to say, I'm washing this one, I'm going to use this one again. Because, again, it's not, it's not something that we begrudgingly allow you to do it out of great need, but here you don't have a great need, why don't you use one of the other forks? No, the issue is that you can't do an activity that is meant to prepare for after Shabbos. If you plan to use this fork again on Shabbos, it's not a preparation for after Shabbos. Could you use another fork? You could, but you don't have to. You're allowed to use this fork. There's nothing. The activity, just from a technical definition, is not a post Shabbos activity. My intention to use the fork today renders this an activity for Shabbos.
Can you wash the fork right after the evening meal, even though you didn't?
Yes, it's not like you're probably referring to. There are certain things that can be done only for immediate use. The most well-known example is borer. When we talk about sorting, which is a sort, that is a biblical full violation of Shabbos to sort things into different categories. But under certain conditions, it's one of those things. It's one of the easiest things to slip up on because you can easily go from full-scale biblical violation of Shabbos to completely fine, acceptable with no restrictions, depending on subtle details. One of the conditions that's required can make it totally fine. You need three conditions to sort something in a permissible way on Shabbos. One is you're taking the thing that you want and leaving behind the thing that you don't want. So, if I'm the classic example of is a bowl of nuts and raisins. If I want to eat nuts, I should pick up the nuts and eat them. I want to eat raisins, I should pick up the raisins and eat them, and leave behind the one that I don't want. What I should not do is take out the nuts which I don't want and put them aside, or take out the raisins that I don't want to put them aside. So number one, I'm going to take the thing that I want. I have to use it right away. Take it and eat it. Take it and eat it, during this meal, but not take it and save it for later. And the third one is I can't use a tool. I got to be done by hand. Say, well, a fork and a spoon is usually considered by hand. It's just an extension of your hand. But a tool would be a strainer, possibly a slotted spoon in some cases. It would be considered something that's designed to aid in a separation process. So I'm doing it by hand, I'm doing it for immediate use, and I'm taking what I want, so it's defined as eating rather than as sorting. Essentially, it's hand to mouth, kind of, conceptually speaking. Even if I'm cutting up the salad to serve during the meal, which it may take us an hour by the time we did kiddush and wash motzi and have gefilte fish, it may be an hour total serving the salad, but since the meal is about to start, it's all considered, even if I'm preparing it for dessert, it's still part of the same meal. In that case, like you said, if I did it the night before, that would be a full-scale violation because it's not for immediate use. That's because, in the case of sorting, the definition of the form of work is sorting, and something that's done for immediate use, hand to mouth, is considered eating rather than sorting. But something that's done for later in the day, even if it's on the same day, even if it's just an hour or two later, it's considered sorting, not eating. So that's why we have that standard when it comes to sorting. But here we're talking about preparation. The issue is preparing for after Shabbos. There's no issue with preparing on Shabbos for later on in the same Shabbos, and there's no requirement that the preparation, it makes no difference whether I'm going to use it in 5 minutes or in 5 hours. As long as I'm going to use it on Shabbos, it's equally the same. And if it's permitted, it's permitted. And it doesn't really matter how far in advance I'm doing it. So, again, just to round out that discussion, as far as the dishes, so some say you can soak the dishes because if I don't soak them, it'll be harder to wash, kind of a case of loss. Many people don't like that idea. So a better alternative is put the dishes into an empty tub in the sink and then wash your hands and you use the sink, just the way you normally would, and the water happens to drain into the tub, but I'm not doing anything specifically and particularly to soak the dishes. I don't know no special effort. Really special. He doesn't say, and I thought that this was a thing. If you had the basin already filled up before Shabbos, then look, I would put the dishes in the sink anyways. And there happens to be a basin of water already in the sink. It's the same as the kind of his case where you put them in an empty basin and wash your hands. Like, what difference does it make? The same idea. The idea is that I'm doing what I would do anyways, and it's like that line, no special effort was expended for the soaking. He doesn't quite say that, so I'm not sure. Again, some people say the whole thing is permitted to begin with because you're making it easier for yourself later, but that's questionable. Anyways, certainly the way that everybody seems to say is okay is to wash your hands, like Mrs. Reeve said, wash your hands over the dishes incidentally.
I'm sorry, but can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I don't know if this is what you're talking about. I can't just rinse my dishes at the time because there's a lot of food on them.
Right. So here I was just looking at the. Yeah, you can't. There's a lot of food in there for what? That's why you should not wash them, right? Oh, interesting. He says part of the argument is just dropping it into the garbage. I think that would qualify as kind of not real preparation. You're just trying to dump on your way into the kitchen. Yeah. So, again, if it's going to be piled up in the kitchen and be really offensive, there could be a basis for leniency there too. But yeah, I think again, there's a certain amount of judgment, but right, like having a half-eaten piece of chicken on the plate, I don't think you're required. The point is, you're not washing it. You're just kind of tossing out the garbage, as opposed to preparing it for later use. Right. I guess. Yeah. Okay. You're not supposed to rinse it, right? Right.
Or take a napkin and put it into the garbage.
Again, there might be some point at which you would say, well, hardly really even doing anything. I'm just, I tilt the plate as I pass the garbage can, and such as falls in. I think there's a certain point at which it's almost like a non-activity. Yeah, you can you drizzle the gravy into the sink. So that's what he said. You can soak it.
Have the water running and pile them up one at a time. And you get a little bit of water on them. These are
Allowed to do that?
No.
After.
Okay.
Well, that's part of what I saw in the notes. He says that you were soaking it now to make it easier after Shabbos. Just soak it after Shabbos. Says you guys soak it. What's the difference? So it's simple. You'll soak it. Yeah.
That's why we had one-time use.
But that's why I remember it was very striking to me, and I don't have a full understanding of it, but they talk about when Erev Pesach falls out to be on Shabbos, so everybody grapples with a big problem of how do you eat Shabbos meal. You can't eat matzah because it's Erev Pesach. If you eat chametz, what do you do with it when you're done? And they say, well, even if you eat it all up, but there's going to be the crumbs, and how will you clean off the crumbs? I say, what's the problem? I mean, why can't you clean off the crumbs? I mean, it's chametz. It's Erev Pesach, it's Shabbos. So somehow that's seen as an inappropriate form of preparation, which is very striking to me. You're not doing it for preparation. You're doing it because you don't want chametz in your house. And actually, the prohibition of chametz starts on Erev Pesach. It starts Shabbos at midday. So what could possibly be the problem? And yet, it's still, so it gives you an idea. I remember hearing a similar. I thought I had heard that, let's say you're rinsing the dishes to prevent bugs or to prevent. That should be okay, because someone told me to ask him a Welcher, and he said, no, put it in the oven. Okay. But again, I don't really fully understand that, because, again, if you can take a fork and say, I have other forks, but I feel like using this one, why can't you say, I could put it in my oven, but I don't want to put it in my oven, I want to just rinse it. So, I'm doing it so that I shouldn't get bugs. Somehow, it may be that because the washing dishes is specifically mentioned, I don't know if it's in the Gemara, but certainly in Shulchan Aruch, the activity is kind of inherently was identified by Chazal as an activity that's very much an obvious form of preparation. We're more restrictive about that because, other things are more subjective, but this was clearly labeled as a preparatory activity. So, some things are more, depends on the context. You can define it based on your intention, but other things kind of have an objective. Dishwashing is just a preparatory activity by its very nature, and I don't know. I'm not sure. It's always something a little bit that I struggle. Well, so I was saying, I think I had heard from somewhere that that would be a good enough reason. It seems like it should be a good reason to wash, but I remember someone saying that they asked him a Welcher, and he said, "Put it in the oven." So I said, so that reminded me of the Erev Pesach question. Like, was you washing the chametz off your dishes? So I was saying it could be that dishwashing, because it's mentioned in the halacha. I don't know if it goes back to the Gemara, but certainly back to Shulchan Aruch. It's mentioned as an activity that's forbidden. It's more like it's objectively defined, and you just get. I don't know. I just get this. That's the thing with Erev Pesach when it falls on Shabbos. And you have a big problem because if you eat chametz, how will you clean the dishes? Why can't you clean up the dishes to get rid of the chametz? You don't want to violate the halacha. I mean, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa to get rid of your chametz in Erev Pesach. I don't want to have chametz. It starts from midday according to Torah law. It's a pasuk. So that's not a good enough reason on Shabbos to wash my dishes. I mean, I'm not doing it for after Shabbos. Somehow that's still considered. So it just gives you an idea. It's hard to, that was what I think we mentioned last time. It reminds me a little bit of the halacha that if you find chametz on Pesach, you're not supposed to burn it till Chol HaMoed. So, why not? I mean, why do you think I'm doing it? I'm doing it because right now I don't want to violate the mitzvah. So apparently, that's not considered a Yom Tov need. You're allowed to cook. You're allowed to, not just allowed to cook. You're allowed to light a fire for warmth. You're allowed to light a fire for any need that you may have, but not because Hashem said to burn chametz. That's not a good enough reason to light a fire on Yom Tov. So what do? You keep the chametz till Chol HaMoed. Now, some people say it's only that really only applies, that's only intended in a situation where you did the kol chamira, and it's really not your chametz according to Torah law, and it's a rabbinic requirement to burn it, and the rabbi said wait till Chol HaMoed. But some people say it's actually even when it's a Torah violation. The Torah, I guess in this case, the Torah gives you a pass because you can't burn it. You have to wait till Chol HaMoed. So there's this idea that somehow, because I need something for a mitzvah, that's not a need. Now maybe fruit flies is more of a need because mitzvah fine, I understand. I can't wash off the chametz crumbs because I don't really need it for Shabbos. I'm not going to use these dishes till next week. But fruit flies is for my own needs. Maybe that would be more of a license. I don't know. That's also true, right? But it's also because I don't like fruit flies, and not just because of it. Okay, anyways. So, I'll tell you something about fruit flies. They come every year, and they leave every year. And they come again, and they leave again. That's just. It doesn't feel like it's temporary. It feels like they'll be there forever, but not really. Okay. It's like annoying people. They come and they go.